Hey everyone, today I want to talk to you about litigation and TBIs. Of course, TBI stands for traumatic brain injury, and so it's caused by some sort of a trauma, and more often than not, it's a car accident. So it's important if you are to help your loved one with a TBI that you become a police officer or a private investigator and a biomechanical expert. Now, what do I mean by all that? It's kind of a mouthful, but whenever a TBI patient or client is involved in litigation, they will inevitably come up against a behemoth insurance company with well-trained lawyers that can find a defense to anything. And some of the biggest ones are that, hey, you didn't lose consciousness, so you couldn't have had a TBI, or you didn't strike your head on anything. You said that in your deposition, and they use those things as kind of sound bites to try to show that the person could not have sustained a TBI. And now nothing could be further from the truth, because the science is very clear that you don't need to have a loss of consciousness, nor do you need to strike your head on anything in order to sustain a TBI. An acceleration-deceleration event like a whiplash can cause a TBI, and more often than not does. But it can help if you engage in the process quickly. And as soon after the accident as possible, there's a few things you can do. First, I would scour the area where the accident occurred and check out any businesses that might have surveillance cameras pointed in that direction. As you know, today's world is full of surveillance cameras, and businesses are always trying to protect themselves against theft or crime and things like that. And so you may be able to get those videos. If they're not willing to share it with you, I would suggest that you have your lawyer, because I'm sure you're going to have one, write a spoliation letter, which essentially asks them not to dispense with that necessary evidence. And usually the DVRs or the recorders associated with those surveillance cameras will generally record about 30 days worth of material before it begins to then overwrite itself. The second thing you can do is kind of interview your loved one. Many times people, especially doctors, and I don't understand this, but they'll just ask them, hey, did you sustain a loss of consciousness? The person says, well, no. Well, it's kind of like asking someone with memory issues, which most of these folks have, hey, can you tell me what you forgot? Well, obviously they forgot it and they can't tell you. So it's important to rephrase that and ask your loved one, what was the last thing that you recalled before the crash? Oh, well, hey, I was holding on to my steering wheel saying, oh my God, oh my God. And well, then what was the next thing you remember? Well, the lady that hit me was tapping on my window saying, sir, are you okay? Well, obviously from that description, when phrased differently, shows that there is a sliver of time that your loved one cannot account for, and that is more indicative of a loss of consciousness. The loss of consciousness doesn't even need to be very long. A matter of seconds is a demonstrable alteration of consciousness that then supports or even further buttresses the notion that they could have sustained a TBI. In addition to that, you want to pay attention to their learning and almost treat them like you would treat your elderly grandparent. A lot of times when I was talking to my grandparents, they could tell me every detail of the D-Day invasion or the Depression because they lived through it, but they couldn't tell me what they had for breakfast that morning. And that is very true of people with TBI, because their ability to recall past events is generally not impaired, whereas their ability to learn and process and recall new information subsequent to the date of the trauma is very, very difficult. So these are some things you can do. The last thing I would propose you do is to go look at the damage to the car. Many times there are forensic clues which can tell you a lot about the dynamics of the crash. For example, look along the pillar by the window where their head was. I've seen some cases where if a person was T-boned and the head whips from one side to the other, it will leave hair that gets caught where the plastic meets the fabric liner, which is a demonstrable element of a head strike. In addition, if they're seatbelted, and hopefully they are, of course, you will see that the seatbelt tensioners will leave like fork marks in the seatbelt itself from that tensioner dragging along the belt. Look for things like that and also what the crash damage looks like many times will show you how that person's body and head moved about the vehicle during the crash sequence to determine whether or not it was a side-to-side motion or a front-to-back motion, because that may lend some clues to whether or not they would have sustained frontal lobe damage or to the sides of the head, which would then correlate potentially to any cognitive or learning difficulties that they have thereafter. I sure hope that this video helps. Litigation is one of the realities of TBI, and the last thing that you want to go through for your loved one is to have insult added to the injury as if they are almost accused of faking or somehow making this up, because the struggle is real, the struggle is daily, and the struggle is permanent. I wish you the best.